What in living daylights is going on, guys? It's your boy Watty the Derpler signing in here for Watt Associations, and welcome to a chess tutorial video. This is our third video in our series of chess tutorial videos in which I will be tutorialing you how to play chess. Now, today in this video, I'm going to be talking about a number of different things. It's going to be a pretty long video, so I'm just going to be talking about a number of different things, and they will vary. So the title's basically just going to be various things, but I'm not sure yet. But let's not waste any time and let's get right into it. So in the last video we talked about the pawn, and remember how I said that there's another type of capture for the pawn that you can use? Now we're going to talk about that now. So watch this very carefully. So you're the pawn that's colored red on e5. That's your 5th rank. And on the next file, which is the D file, there's a black pawn who hasn't moved. And remember that he can move forward either 1 or 2 squares. Now what the black pawn chooses to do is move forward 2 squares from d7 to d5. Now if you want to, you can literally just go straight forward, or you can actually take that piece while you pass the d6 square, which is the piece that it would have normally taken on. So here's the position after you've made the capture. So let's explain again how it works. So your pawn is on your 5th rank, and your opponent has an unmoved pawn on the next or previous file. If he moves that pawn 2 squares forward, you can on your next move only take it as if it moved 1 square forward. Now let's see it from the other side of the chessboard. So you're standing on b2 minding your own beeswax, and there's a black pawn on c4 waiting to take you if you move to b3. But the black pawn doesn't know that if you move to b4 it will still be able to take you. So let's see what happens. If you move 2 squares forward to b4, that's black's 5th rank, so black can take you by moving to b3. Or if you move to b3, it will obviously be able to take you because that's how pawns normally take. Now here's the position after you've been taken. Now this is called en passant, and it's French for in passing, and the rule is hard to remember and easy to forget. So if you need to refresh your memory, the easiest way to remember it is French is for in passing, and when your opponent is passing you or when you're passing your opponent, either one can take either one. So let's go on to our next topic, which is check and checkmate. Well, next topics. Now this is absolutely necessary because it will decide whether you win or lose a game of chess. So pay attention and make sure you understand it as I go along. And if at any time you need to pause or rewind the video, feel free to, because it will be absolutely necessary for your first games of chess. Now in this diagram shown, black has just moved his rook to a1, attacking the enemy king. Now if you play a move that attacks the enemy king, this is called check. Now here white is in check. If you're in check, then you have to do something about it. There's no other choice. The only way that white can get out of check in this situation is by moving his king to d2. And this is white's only safe square, as the rook on a1 is guarding the d1 and f1 squares, and the king on f3 is guarding the f and e2 squares. Now in this position, white can't get out of check by moving his king because the rooks on b1 and a2 are guarding the squares d1, f1, e2, d2, and f2. Now here, as you can see, there is a white rook on d4. This rook can come down to d1 and block the check. Black could then capture the rook on d1, as you can see in the diagram. Now in this position we can see the third way of getting out of check. White can, and also has to, get out of check by capturing the rook on d1 with his king. Now as you can see on the diagram now, there are 3 ways to get out of check, and we have just discussed all of them. You can either move the king to a square where he is not under attack. You can block the check by putting any piece in the way, but this only goes for when you're in check by a queen, a rook, or a bishop. So kings, pawns, and knights do not count. The third way is by capturing the piece that is checking you, either with your king or another piece. Now in this position, white is in check from the rook on a1. He cannot move to d2, e2 or f2 because of the rook on b2. He can't capture the rook on a1. There is no other piece to block the check, and he can't obviously move to d1 or f1 because of the rook on a1. He is in check and he can't do anything about it. This is checkmate, and this means that black has won the game. Here is another example of checkmate. The white king is in check from the pawn on d2, and the pawn on e2 is preventing him from moving to d1 or f1. And the black king stops the white king from capturing the d2 pawn, which is checking the king. Again, black has won the game. In this position, the black knight is checking the white king. Now, remember, knights can jump over pieces, so this is actually a check. The white king can't move because he's surrounded by his own men, and none of the men can capture the knight. Also, because, as I said earlier, nothing can block knights' checks because knights can jump over pieces. So this is checkmate. Now, also, we could use the word mate for checkmate, but it's literally just a shortened version of it. You can use whichever. Also, this type of mate where you smother yourself in by your own pieces, only a knight happens to check you, this is called a smothered mate. Now let's go on to something else. Now, as I said before, you can win a game by getting checkmate. Now we will learn how to draw games in chess. Now this is called stalemate. In this position, it's white to move. He's not in check at the moment, but he can't move anywhere because the queen is guarding the squares f1, e2, d2, and d1, and also the king is guarding the f2 square. There is no other piece to move, it's only the king, and the king can't move anywhere. So what do? The answer is nothing. This is called stalemate, and it's basically when you draw a game in chess. But in this position, there isn't stalemate as the pawn can move forward to a3 or a4. Now, if you look very carefully at this position, it is actually stalemate. It doesn't matter if the pawn can move, because if you look at the bishop on a5, if the pawn moves, the bishop would then be checking the king. And as we talked about with the king in an earlier lesson, the king can't be exposed to check. This would be an illegal move. So it is literally the same position as before, which means it is stalemate. Also, a handy little thing that you should know, what the bishop pawn king formation is called a pin. Now, what pins are? It is basically when a piece is attacking a weak piece, and then that weak piece is guarding the attack from a stronger piece. So if you look back to this position, the bishop is attacking the pawn. Now, if the pawn moves out of the way, the bishop would be attacking the king, and then the king would then be captured by the bishop on the next move if the pawn decides to move. But in this position, the pawn can't decide to move because, as I said earlier, and as I literally just said like half a second ago, the king can't be exposed to a check. So the pawn is pinned against the king, and it is stalemate. Now, there are two more things I need to talk about before I end up this video. The first one is called castling. Now, castling is basically a double move of the king and the rook, which each player can only do once in the game, hence it is crucial that you understand this. Now, castling is when you move your king 2 squares towards the rook, and in the same move, you move your rook 1 square on the opposite side directly next to the king. So it looks a lot easier and easier to understand with a visual representation that you can see right now. Now, you can only castle if your king has never moved, your rook has never moved, there are no pieces between the king and the rook, and you are not in check at the moment. And it doesn't matter if you've been in check in the past, but it just has to be that you are not in check at the moment. Now, here's the position after both players have castled. White has castled on the king's side, and black has castled on the queen's side. You'll notice that the black king is nearer the center, while the white king is nearer the corner, on their respective sides if you do ratio. Now, other castling rules are that you cannot castle if your king would end up in check. Now here, white can't castle because it would put his king in check from the black bishop. You can also not castle if the square your king crosses is attacked by an enemy piece. In this position, black cannot castle because his king would cross over the d8 square, which is attacked by the rook on d1. So neither of the players can castle at this particular moment in time. Now there's one more thing that I need to tell to you, and that is the different ways that you can draw a game in chess. Now you know that you can draw a game in chess by a stalemate, and there are a few other ways. The game is declared a draw if it is not impossible for either player to checkmate the opposite player. So if you reach a position where a king is against another king, or a king is against another king and its bishop, or a king is against another king and its knight, the game is a draw. Now, a king and a queen against one king is easy to win. A king and a rook against another king is a bit harder, but still pretty easy. King and two bishops against one king is harder, and king, bishop, and knight against king is really hard, but not impossible. Now, king and two knights can only mate if your opponent makes a crucial and stupid mistake. A draw can also be agreed at any point in the game. Now, in this position, the game will be a draw as long as white moves its king between A1 and B2. If black knows white won't do anything else, black can offer a draw. If white accepts the draw, then both teams have drawn. But if white does not accept the draw, then you have to carry on playing until a draw has been settled. Because obviously the white king wouldn't be so stupid as to move to, say, B1 and then the pawn gets promoted and then moves down to like B3 or something. Because that would just be stupid. Now, if you're playing in a competition, there are two other ways you can draw a game of chess. The first way is that you can claim a draw if you reach the same position 3 times with the same player to move, but not if you make the same move 3 times. You can also claim a draw if you play 50 moves each, so 100 moves in total, without a pawn move or a capture. So if you end up, for example, king and rook against king, you only have 50 moves in which to get checkmate. Or the black king can take the white king if it's black against white. What am I talking about? The black king can take the white rook if it's the black king against white rook and white king, and the black king can take the white rook, and then that will be settled as a draw. But you will only have 50 moves to get checkmate if it's, say, a queen and a king versus a king, or a rook and a king versus a king, for example. You only have 50 moves to get checkmate when you're in that position. Now, finally, to complete this episode, I want to say that there are other ways to win as well as checkmate, just like there are other ways to draw as well as stalemate. Now, a way that you can win, apart from checkmate obviously, is if your opponent resigns. Now, when you get old and you can't do your job anymore, you hand in your resignation and you resign the job, right? So it goes the same way with chess. At any point in the game, you can resign if you think that your position is hopeless and you are definitely going to lose just to like save time or something. But until you've played more, it's best not to resign, because you never know if your opponent will make a mistake or not, and if he doesn't, then you'll learn from seeing how he beats you. Finally, if you ever played in a tournament, you might have to use a chess clock, and if your opponent moves too slowly and runs out of time, you will win via time. So that's all we have time for in this video, guys. If it did help, please send a redstone signal to that like button and power it up. And if it didn't help, hit the dislike button and let me know in the comment section down below. Also, comment what you would like to see for future videos. And I have something to tell you before I officially close off the video. I am in the Cayman Islands. Yes, guys, I am in that tiny, island in the Caribbean. I'm at Grand Cayman at the moment, and I am enjoying myself. It's a really beautiful country, and it's really, really nice. I really, really like the country. It's hot. It's much hotter here than where I was before. It's really, really nice. I really like the country. I like the vibe here. Everything's just amazing. So that's all we have time for in this video, guys. I'd like to thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one. Peace out.